Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with Andrew Moran, Tim Donner, Scott Cosenza, and Graham Noble, and this is the Conservative Five, an online TV production of Liberty Nation News. On today's episode, I can see clearly now, Trump is taking a hard step against the lower judiciary in threatening habeas corpus. Phrase. Is a Cubs fan? Is he a White Sox fan? Or just a good old Midwestern pontiff? We'll discuss Leo in We've Been Poped Again. And did anyone else notice the silence emanating from armchair economists? Well, we did. And they went for a bathroom break. So we'll talk about it in the Econ bomb cyclone. Finally, it's another quick fix to flex the brain in Just for Fun, Volume 71. All this and more in this edition of the Conservative Five.
I don't want to perturb Scott.
The U.S. Constitution gives the president the power to suspend a key protection afforded to those seized by the government. Stymied by multiple nationwide injunctions initiated by district court judges, President Trump may now institute that power on the eve of an oddball Supreme Court case set for argument on Thursday, May 15th. The administration seems to have given the High Court an ultimatum: reign in the lower courts or habeas protections will go away. No reason to not just jump in here with Mr. Scott Cosenza, Liberty Nation News' top legal eagle. Scott, will President Trump join Lincoln and Clinton in restricting court access? I mean, is this something we're prepared for?
Well, I certainly hope he doesn't. Removing habeas protections is something that those of us libertarianish type folks think is a bad idea because of the key protection it does provide. Right now, your one protection for being able to redress an executive action, whether it's your local police, state police, or the FBI or immigration officials, is that you get to go to court and challenge that action. And the mechanism by which you can challenge it is the court has the legal right to demand of the executive branch, bring that person before me so that we can sort these claims out. And if they lose that right to order the executive to bring the person before them, then you may be on a plane to El Salvador or somewhere else. Now, that is not unconstitutional because it says within the Constitution that the president can suspend that power, but he can do so in the event of an invasion. And I think that this is a thin legal ground to say the most charitable way to put it, I think, is to call, for instance, the MS-13 or Tren de Agua an invasion, or just general illegals as an invasion, when we know that the immediate past president, according to the current president, that the immediate past president invited these people in, practically, gave them airline tickets and sustenance and luxury hotels and monthly stipends better than we give Americans that are destitute and down on their luck. So to call that an invasion and then have that justify the removal of habeas, well, that's my opinion. What will the Supreme Court decide? I don't know. It's an oddball case because there are 3 cases now consolidated, and there's no quote-unquote question presented, which is usually how the Supreme Court operates. They establish a question presented and people argue for that. This is all on a motion to basically overturn the lower court injunctions, which, as you said, are nationwide. And the idea from the Trump administration is if one person, for instance, the Maryland father, for instance, if he challenges his deportation, then a court sitting in Maryland might reverse that judgment or something like that, but then not rule for all persons, or in the United States who happen to come from Venezuela, for instance. That's right. The sort of thing that they're arguing against, that it's inappropriate for those district court judges to issue these nationwide rulings when they should confine their rulings to a very specific set of plaintiffs and facts.
This particular current controversy concerns President Trump's day one executive order on birthright citizenship and denying U.S. citizens U.S. citizenship to those whose parents were in the country illegally when they were born. Andrew, is this the right place to plant the flag on this?
The constitutionality, I'll defer to one of the greatest constitutional experts in the world today, Mr. Scott Cosenza, of course. But it just shows that he's advancing at warp speed. The whole Trump agenda is just advancing at warp speed, whether it's trade or immigration. He wants to get things done as much as possible, particularly, a year before the midterm election season. But when it comes to birthright citizenship, I mean, so many countries already have restrictions on this practice outside of North America. Canada has similar policies in the United States. But, you look at Germany, for example. Germany, one parent must live in Germany for at least 8 years. In the UK, if one parent is a citizen or legally settled, that's another issue. But overall, no matter what, whether he's taking legal avenues or he's ruling with an iron fist, he's doing so at Trump's speed, as the White House usually says. And go on a different subject here. With China, for instance, the experts have said that China wants to drag its feet before the midterm elections to weaken Trump and to get the best deal possible. But Trump knows these things, so he's gonna just hammer out these issues as fast as possible and say, look how much I got done in my first year, and then sit back and relax and look at the fruits of his efforts.
Why would we want to emulate the Germans? That's my question. What does that have to do with anything?
I don't know. Every 50 years.
I'm pointing out the restrictions on birthright citizenship. That's all I'm pointing out.
For countries that aren't the United States of America, the greatest immigrant success. I mean, we're a country of immigrants. Unlike you Canadian.
Andrew, way to step it up.
But
I'm not advocating anything. I am not advocating anything. All I'm pointing out is that there's other restrictions. That's it. Outside of the American.
All right. Settle down, Andrew.
How do I Scott points figures at me? I get nervous.
Well, okay. Well, Scott, stop scaring Andrew. Okay. Tim, can I go to you now? Can I pivot to Tim, please? I mean, okay, so this kind of seems unprecedented, and according to Scott, very unpopular. But we also know that Trump isn't the first guy to use the measure before. I mean, does this equate? Is this a good place to drop it in?
Well, first to the matter of the district court rulings that had nationwide impact. For those unfamiliar with it, the district courts are the lowest rung on the federal judicial ladder. And it seems to me that the limits are inherent in the very position they hold. District court. It's not a national court. It's a district court. And if you have one single district judge out of, I think it's over 300 across the country, making national rulings, it effectively really sticks a dagger in the balance of power when you step in and tell the executive what he can and cannot do. They're able to actually dictate foreign policy with these national injunctions. Now, to the matter of habeas corpus being suspended, the most famous instance, of course, was Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War.
Right.
Because we were at war, and he felt it necessary to suspend habeas because of the fact we were involved in a bloody war involving the entirety of the country. That was relatively explicable under the circumstances. But the most recent instance was 1996, when Bill Clinton effectively limited habeas in the matter of the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act. There were concerns that it increased the risk of executing innocent individuals, as Scott has said. But the basis for it was preventing frivolous appeals and expediting justice, which, of course, expediting it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be better justice than if you take your time. So what it did, this Death Penalty Act, Anti-Terrorism Act of 96, it limited the ability of prisoners, particularly those facing the death penalty, to seek federal habeas corpus relief. And even many Democrats were concerned about it at the time, but the act passed. And so moving forward to 2025, I suppose, to use Clinton's own language, it depends what the meaning of invasion is. I mean, if it's a uniform national force, that's one thing. If it's the Mexican military invading the United States, that's a pretty clear-cut case. But when
The Supreme Court has said that they favor the plain understanding of those words at the time they were adopted. And I think that's what we should go on for our understanding of what an invasion
Well, I think this is where you come up with the difference between a textualist and a literalist, and those who believe we should use the intent of the words when they were written as opposed to the literal text as it is written. Right, Scott? I mean, this is one of the nuances of people who are constitutionalists, broadly speaking, in the judicial branch. But, this is an issue that is always at the forefront when there's any talk of limiting habeas corpus.
I just want to add one thing there. It didn't accelerate justice. It accelerated the timeline, and both justice and injustice were accelerated. So there are people who I believe were wrongfully executed during that time, and that was an injustice that was accelerated against them. And then there were people who were perhaps rightfully, if you believe that that's a just punishment, so executed without those habeas protections. So that just cut down the timeline.
Right, let's bring this back to what's going on now with President Trump. And Graham, is he just pushing the envelope? It just seems like it's just. I hate to say it, but it seems like it's a lot. It's a lot, and I think he's pushing the envelope. So I'm looking for somebody to tell me what the heck is the strategy here.
Well, I think he's, just acting out of frustration at this point. I'm very much on the fence about the whole habeas corpus thing. I think there are certain, and this is my personal opinion, that there are certain people in this country illegally who, quite frankly, don't deserve any rights at all, and we should just get rid of them as quickly as possible because they are dangerous people. The rest of them, I think they deserve, humane treatment and legal treatment, and they deserve to have their rights respected. So I think when we're talking about illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, to me, there are two distinct categories. But, that's just my personal observation. But, Trump is frustrated because, look, here's an interesting thing. I'm not going to bore you with the actual numbers, but if you look at presidents going back to Ronald Reagan and you look at which presidents, deportations by president. And we're not including Trump's current term because we're less than 4 months into it right now, so you can't say. But, including Trump's first term and going back from Biden to Reagan, the order of deporter in chief goes like this: Bill Clinton, Bush Jr., Bush Sr., Reagan, Obama, Biden, and then Trump. He's deported the fewest people as president out of all of those presidents, and yet none of them got the sort of pushback that he's getting, particularly from the courts. And so, I'm sure he's enraged by this. And I think the whole habeas corpus thing is like, to me, that's like a Hail Mary. It's like, we've got to rein in these judges. And these judges, let's face it, these judges are out of order what they're doing. And it is political. And he's saying, okay, if you don't rein in the judges, I'm taking the nuclear option, which is suspension of habeas corpus. I don't think we should start suspending those kind of rights. That's not a good way to go, I think.
I will add this: the quality of the district court judges. Wow. If you watch some of those confirmation hearings from the Biden administration when there were, it was pretty bad. Some of these folks with just trash records and non-intellectual, basically wokey types. So it's no surprise that you see a lot of that.
Well,
they've been propped up by the big guys. So.
I was just going to say on the matter of the rankings or the deportation standings that Graham spoke about, it's sort of like the unemployment rate. You have to consider how valid it is when, for example, Joe Biden called any person who was turned away at the border and sent back to Mexico at the border was considered a deportation. But of course, that wasn't really a deportation. That's very different than what Tom Homan is doing now, where he's searching for and finding illegal aliens and arranging for their departure from the country. That's just like the unemployment rate when they say, well, it's 4.2%. But the most important thing is how many people are seeking jobs. How big is the workforce? Because when the workforce becomes smaller and smaller, then the unemployment rate is going to become smaller too. So it's a matter of how these numbers are calculated.
Yeah, well, it's the exact same thing, Tim. They just change what the definition of what unemployment is. Like,
All right, guys.
so we'll just take these people off the rails.
We're way off course.
Economics. No, we're talking about economics now. Let's get something.
Oh, we're way off course, guys. We're gonna close this one down. We've got to move on, but it was getting kind of toasty, a little spicy. Andrew finally got his voice back. That's nice to see. Look, Trump is definitely the flashpoint of all things judiciary in 2025, and where he will take habeas corpus next or not, or use and abuse, we don't know, but we'll let you know when we do. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for taking a break with us. Pope, as they say in the Midwest, we got us a pope. After the white smoke cleared, a good old Midwestern guy emerged as the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. Robert Francis Prevost, now Leo XIV, is the 267th Pope. He's the first from the United States. He's also an Augustinian, and only the second from the Western Hemisphere. The Pope is a member of the Order of St. Augustine, founded in 1244, dedicated to the teachings of St. Augustine, which makes sense, of Hippo, and known for communal living, poverty, and service to others. Sounds like a gas. But he brings politics alive too, so let's get at it, Graham. You have 2 minutes. Let's talk about this Pope.
Well, you picked probably exactly the wrong person for this job, because being born into a Scottish Protestant family, I have an ancestral. I do not see eye to eye with the Vatican, let's say. Political leaders should keep out of religious affairs, and religious leaders should keep out of political affairs. And I believe that the founding fathers believed that as well. Of course, when has it ever happened? The Vatican, since its inception, has been involved in, international politics, geopolitics, if you like. They've always been, but generally speaking, historically, popes have not gotten into the Vatican's always had what I consider to be a rather kind of clever policy, if you like, of it is kind of subtly thrown its weight behind certain world powers in certain international conflicts throughout the history of the world, without actually delving into the nitty-gritty of political ideology. And I think the last Pope really kind of went a little over the top with that, perhaps, in my opinion. The left in this country, or if you like, the anti-Trumpers here in America, are already kind of hoping that somehow this Pope is going to be, they're almost going to use him against Trump, or that he himself is going to be kind of an anti-Trump Pope. I think they're going to be disappointed. I mean, I have a feeling that this Pope is likely to stick to Catholic doctrine, not necessarily strictly, but more strictly than the last guy. I think the people in the left media over here who are already kind of saying that he's going to be a quote unquote bulwark against Trump are going to be disappointed. I don't think he is. I think he's probably going to stay out of American politics less than the last guy. But it's kind of interesting. I was going to go into a whole thing about. I was reading a survey the other day, which is fascinating. American Catholics are actually veering drastically away from traditional Catholic doctrine in many areas, such as same-sex marriage, and should deacons be allowed to get? Are they called deacons? I don't know, but anyway, those mid-level, I think, Catholic officials or whatever, that they should be allowed to get married and all this kind of thing. So, I don't know if that's happening all over the world, but certainly in the States, Catholicism's hold over the devoted of the Catholic Church is kind of weakening. And I think perhaps this Pope, far be it from me to give him any advice, but I think this Pope might want to concentrate more on the popularity of Catholic doctrine rather than get involved in, what Trump is doing.
In my neck of the woods, nobody was really debating, if this is the best guy for the Catholic religion. They want to know if, he's a Chicago Cubs fan or a White Sox fan. And there's a lot of discussion on that. But, besides MLB wise, Scott, is this a good guy? Is this a good Catholic? Is this a good person to take over this order?
Oh, I'll leave that to the Almighty to decide if he's a good guy or a good person.
You don't want to go up against the good Lord?
I would say that to comment on what Graham has said, from the conservative Catholic perspective, and I say this as a cultural Catholic myself, the reason why the faithful or the members of the church don't adhere to those principles is because they've been dropped by the leadership, and it has been the decimation of the church has been at the hands of the leadership who have acted in ways to contravene its very doctrine. And that's what they are calling out for and crying out for as an actual Catholic leader of the Catholic Church who will say without apology, yes, we can say that without hating any gay person or thinking they're particularly evil or anything, that's not it's not okay if you're going to be a Catholic to engage in same-sex marriage. And we don't have that. We haven't had that. And one of the things that for people who aren't Catholic, who maybe don't know, they can track the level of conservatism in the Pope is the celebration of the Latin Mass. The very conservative Catholics like to celebrate Mass in Latin or hear Mass spoken in Latin. Before Vatican II conference, Latin was the quote-unquote universal language of the church, and people who were Catholic who lived in Guatemala could go to Mass in Germany or the United States to a Catholic Mass and all speak the same language. And then with this kind of popularization of the faith for, the every person, and that's dilution of the faith for some folks, we've got the local languages. But the previous Pope actually denied Catholics the ability to hear, it's very, it's a dictatorial top-down thing. If the Pope says no go, it's not like the local churches can do what they want. And so that's kind of a bellwether, I think, that we can look at to see just how tolerant this Pope will be of a more conservative Catholicism. And as far as baseball is concerned, maybe we have an answer with Pete Rose has now been declared eligible for reintroduction into baseball posthumously. So maybe we'll see him in the Hall of Fame. And the Pope did spend some time in Philly in college, and so maybe he has an appreciation for the Phillies, and we can call that an answered prayer.
That's doubtful. Very doubtful.
Oh yeah, no, he's a Chicago guy. It's just which Chicago team? Come on, you can't be any more Chicago than that. Tim, abortion, divorce, sexuality issues. We've touched on those. Does Leo line up conservative, or is he a little more open to watching the church change for the better or for the worst?
Well, first to the most important matter, which is baseball. There's no doubt which team he's a fan of. He's been a White Sox fan his whole life. In fact, they plucked a picture of him in White Sox regalia during the 2005 World Series, which was won by the White Sox against Houston. So, those Cub fans that are hoping that he's somehow a Cubs fan. In fact, if you're a White Sox fan, you cannot like the Cubs, just like if you're a Mets fan, you cannot like the Yankees. Or
unless you're Hillary Clinton, where you can change at will.
Or, yes, that's true. Very good, Scott. Or, like Andrew, if you're a Red Sox fan, you cannot be a Yankees fan. But, Graham said that he thinks that the Pope, the new Pope, the first American Pope, which is a momentous thing, will stay out of American politics. And that may be true going forward. But if you look at his social media posts over the past few years, specifically since Donald Trump came to office, it's quite obvious that he is no fan of Donald Trump. In fact, I mean, he has retweeted or re-axed, I guess it's called now, several anti-Trump screeds. So he may not say anything and probably won't agree with Graham. He's probably not going to weigh in anymore, but he's already on the record. And so I think putting that in context, you would say, well, maybe he's also more of a liberal on balance. But the record doesn't really show that when it comes to social issues. He has consistently opposed abortion. He has not fully endorsed or opposed the blessing of same-sex unions. But he's also suggested through his comments, though not explicitly, that he is not a fan of LGBTQ plus special rights or recognition. He has expressed concerns about the promotion of gender ideology. He's been a vocal opponent, as I said, of abortion, and at some point referred to it as a form of murder, which is a very consistent Catholic doctrine. He has views on divorce, which of course is prohibited in the Catholic Church, and has led to the absurd situation often where somebody who's been married for years has that marriage annulled as if it never took place.
Right.
And effectively, it's a divorce. The church's stance on marriage and divorce is very much written in stone. And yet, at the same time, the Catholic Church includes people like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, who are openly pro-choice or pro-abortion rights, even though Catholicism being a top-down religion, there's no room for people to dispute, unlike in the Protestant denominations, which are very varied in their beliefs. The Catholic Church is not, and yet many people continue to call themselves Catholics who are not faithful to Catholic doctrine.
It's like party identity in the United States. You know, people call themselves a Republican or a Democrat, but they could be any kind of a thing. There's no excommunication from the church for espousing, you know, for being Nancy Pelosi. By the way, that annulment thing is very interesting. That was a money grab, by the way. So what happened was all these Catholics, when the divorce waves came in after the 60s and liberalization of divorce laws in the United States, it used to be that the Pope himself had to sign your annulment. That's how rare it was in the Catholic Church to get an annulment. The Pope himself had to sign it. But now, if you pay a significant sum of money, that's how you get your annulment. You pay a money. And then, by the way, the party that you're married to, if they want to challenge the annulment, they have to pay to have it challenged, to have their objection to having their marriage annulled. So,
No, that's exciting.
Well, Ted Kennedy
Ted
Kennedy was married to his wife for like over 20 years.
yeah.
And they had the marriage annulled as if it didn't happen, even though they had multiple children during the marriage. And those are before the days when people often, as now, have children without ever getting married.
Sure.
Well, Spencer Tracy, he was a Catholic, and you know his wife was a Catholic, and he had a long affair with Katharine Hepburn, and he never divorced his wife. He just, he gave her money, let her live in the house, all that stuff, but he just never divorced her and just kept kissing and smooching Katharine Hepburn.
Okay, so we've gone down a weird.
Thank you for that reference point, Andy. Yeah, I'm sure we all appreciate it.
Here's what I want to know. I mean, this is such a big deal. The pomp, the circumstances, the smoke, the this, the that, blah, 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 blah. And
hold on just a second, Sarah. For all our Catholic viewers, that might be just a little disrespectful.
No, I'm not done yet. Stop interrupting me. I'm not done yet. What I'm saying is, for this religion to have such a high place in everything culturally, what I want to know is, I mean, they're not even the top spot. Catholics aren't the top religion in the world. Andrew, Christians, Jews, Islam, what's your big religion, and why is all of this so important when we don't see that coming from any of the other, ideology?
I'll answer that question. I just want with all the things you were discussing, it reminded me of a clip of a scene from Hannah and Her Sisters when Woody Allen's trying to find a religion and he chooses Catholicism and he says, "I want to become a Catholic," specifically the anti-nuclear, pro-abortion, same-sex wing of the Catholic faith. So I'll put this conversation. All right, so it's funny to ask this question. I saw a clip recently of Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire, and I think he was on Piers Morgan, and he said that Pope Francis was one of the greatest was probably the most terrific modern pope because of how many people joined the Catholic faith. But in the United States alone, according to Pew Research data, this is from from 2009 to 2024. When Pope Francis climbed to the throne in 2013, 21% of U.S. adults were Catholics. At the end of last year, that number actually fell to 20% of people identifying as Catholic. So I've seen all these reports of how many young people are joining the Catholic faith and they want to become Catholics and they want some sort of structure in their lives. But now, how does it compare to other religions? If you again, this is a separate Pew Research report, and it found that 62% of Americans identify as Christians, 2% are Jewish, and 1% are Muslims. Now, within that report, I do find something interesting. Maybe Scott will appreciate this. It said that 83% believe in God, and 70% of Americans believe in heaven, hell, or both. Now, this might have some nuance, but as everyone's read Jean-Paul Sartre, and he said in that famous play, No Exit, hell is other people. And so, those are the numbers from was interested in the economics of religion.
I think without getting into a big theological discussion, we have to remember that when you're talking about, Catholicism is a religion. When you're talking about Islam and Christianity and Judaism, they are faiths. And it's kind of slightly different because a faith has different religions within it, like Islam, Christianity, Judaism. They're all split into different, what you might call religions. But, to answer your question about what is the big deal with Catholicism, and sorry, Scott, I don't mean that disrespectfully. I'm just kind of borrowing from Jerry Seinfeld there. What's the big deal with Catholicism? But the big deal about Catholicism is that to a certain extent, the Catholic Church, the Vatican, has shaped history to a very large extent in terms of both here in Europe, not so much maybe in North America, but certainly in Europe, in South America, and in the Middle East. The Catholic Church, you can't talk about the history of any of those regions without talking about the involvement of the Catholic Church. So,
well, the Cold War, by the way, if you want to include that, I mean, that certainly affected us. So the church was very much instrumental in bringing about the end of the Cold War.
Well, I will say this, the Vatican Council, the conclave, was faithful to the idea of, the Catholic tradition of helping the poor, because by naming Pope Leo, they actually helped the poorest team in the history of Major League Baseball. The White Sox lost an all-time record 121 games in the 2024 season. So they certainly have reached out and provided alms for the poor in the form of the White Sox and their fans.
Well, the Rockies will...
I know I will be watching Cubs baseball to see if they get closer to the pennant and, be on the lookout for the Pope Mobile at Wrigley Field. I am not
going to happen.
And I'm not 100% certain that he's not going to be skulking around looking for, I don't know.
Actually, Wrigley's Field, according to Barack Obama, I would have you know.
Oh, that's great. Well, of course, Barack Obama was famously a White Sox fan as well.
All right. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for talking Pope with us today. And we'll see you in the next go around. It's kind of getting kind of fun out there in political land. Thanks. A China-U.S. trade deal. Recession odds collapse. Markets soar. Democrats retreat. The GOP is taking a victory lap. Winning! Whee! What a difference a month makes. After the April 2nd Liberation Day announcement, Cassandras everywhere warned of doom and gloom hitting the United States. The United States may have had a de-escalation day event on May 12th, as the world's two largest economies agreed to a 90-day tariff pause. and lowered each country's respective levies. I'm just going to say it plain. The administration is loving the wins. Let's listen to Trump on his China deal. Take a look at this clip.
In addition, yesterday we achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed.
Well, that was our happy President Trump taking his little lap. Andrew, give us the high points here. It's been a month, and things look pretty good, and everybody was doom and gloom. So go ahead. Floor's yours, babe.
Okay, I'm going to prepare for hate mail and fire it pegs at my doorstep, but maybe send it to Scott too, because I think he agrees with me. But this whole plan of his is just, it absolutely backfired on the Trump administration. He and his team, they're backtracking on these aggressive plans. I've mentioned this before in my articles and at LN Radio, I think on this program too, is that the stocks crashed. More importantly, the U.S. Treasury yield soared. Now, the administration did not want to see that. So I think it's better to describe Trump's trade agenda as shuffling chairs on the boat deck. I think with this whole China agreement, the U.S.-UK trade agreement is probably a good barometer of what you're going to achieve, whereby not much at all. Trump had the 145% tariffs. Now he's lowering it to 30. So you're pretty much back to square one without anything achieved. During a press conference, the one that you aired, he was asked, "Do you trust China is going to follow through on its promises, including removing non-trade or non-monetary trade barriers?" And he said yes, because China really wants the deal very badly. But if you read the National Trade Estimate Report from the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, the prelude pretty much to the Liberation Day event, it made a long list of all the non-tariff trade barriers that the United States wants China to abolish. One of them is, of course, the industrial subsidies. For an economy that's on the brink of a recession, or perhaps if you listen to Scott Bessent, a depression, how the heck would Beijing do that? Beijing would not overnight saying, okay, we're removing all these subsidies for manufacturing companies or tech companies or whatever the case. So this whole deal, it's mind-boggling, because all he's doing is just resetting trade and declaring victory. Now, I will say to conclude is that a month ago we went from millions of Americans are gonna screw tiny little screws into the back of iPhones to saying, let's make a deal with China. So I think in the first, was it more than 100 days now, and on trade front, the only thing that you can give kudos to the Trump administration is that about $5 trillion in private investment from all of these companies. Kraft Heinz was the latest one before we went on air. It announced a $3 billion investment in manufacturing. So he's getting all these private companies without using any taxpayer subsidies to achieve that goal. You saw that in the first quarter GDP report, when he saw an all-time high spike of, I think it was 22% in private investment. So in the end, I will only declare victory and winning if at least two of Scott Bessent's three arrows growth strategies achieved. One of them is, of course, 3% deficit of GDP, 3 million extra barrels of crude oil production per day, and 3% GDP growth. Until then, I'm not doing any victory laps. I'm not declaring winning. I'm not getting tired of winning, and all the tropes from the White House.
Jeez, Andrew, you finally get the floor, and you kind of ran. I don't know what happened there.
I'm going to press Scott, because Scott doesn't seem impressed by any of my appearance today.
All right. Hey, Graham, where is
I was impressed by that, Andrew, and thank you for it.
Aw, it's a bromance. Graham, where is inflation hovering, and can you give us a reality bite? I mean, is it actually coming down, or are we going up? What's going on here?
Well, it's maybe too early at this point to tell, really, again, because we're less than 4 months into this administration, and we're only 5 months into the year. And of course, what happens now, or what happened last week or the week before in terms of trade deals or any kind of major economic moves may not be reflected in the inflation numbers for a couple of months yet. So we don't really know. But right now, annual rate, and of course, if I was Andrew, I'd be breaking this down into the various CPI numbers and all that kind of stuff, and the non-farm numbers and everything. But generally speaking, the annual inflation rate right now is 2.3%. which is still lower than the annual inflation rate of any of the years when in which Biden was in the White House. And in fact, during Trump's last term, inflation, the highest annual rate of inflation was still significantly lower than the lowest annual inflation that we enjoyed under Joe Biden. So right now it's 2.3%. If you're asking me whether it's going to go up or down, I don't know. I mean, certainly I would imagine it might tick up next month from where it was this month. I mean, the increase for April was 0.2%. Is that going to happen again in May? I'm going to be if I was Jim Cramer, I would say it's probably going to be 3 times that next month.
There's a great barometer for anyone who's interested in this stuff. It's called Trueflation. And Trueflation, it measures inflation by using 30 million real-time indicators. And it says that, right, the real annual inflation rate is about 1.7%. So whether it's the calm before the storm, the inflation trends, at least in the short term, are looking quite promising. And if you look at the more official, like say the Cleveland Fed inflation nowcasting model, it shows that next month inflation is going to be 2.4%. So whether this is stability or a calm before the storm, it should be fascinating data insights.
I just want to make the point that data is also totally corrupted because they just change what inflation is to make a more favorable number. Those in power. And if you go to shadow stats, you'll learn about the way inflation and unemployment and a number of these other key metrics were previously defined, and now they're redefined, and all the redefinitions make it better for management. So you can assess on your own whether or not it's a good redesign.
But unfortunately, the fun to say people are going to have to be critical thinkers here, Scott.
I'm just going to throw one more thing real quickly. Because I think this is important to be said. There's a few older words of wisdom, such as never start a land war in Asia and never invade Russia during the winter. I'm going to add one to that. Never make a trade deal with China.
All right. Well, hey, Mr. Donner, are we seeing results faster than anticipated or predicted in econ circles? I mean, is it good or is this a little too much?
Well, if I was buying what Andrew's selling, I might put a gun to my head right now. I mean, he is looking at one of the trees in a forest of tariffs tariff deals that Trump is hoping to sign over the course of time. It's way too early to determine whether his tariff strategy is working or not. But one of the things that Trump, one of the key components of Trump's famous art of the deal is to use leverage to the maximum effect while still forging a deal that's a win-win for both sides, rather than crushing one side and having the other, celebrating with champagne. That's not a good deal. A good deal is when both sides win. So in terms of China, I mean, what Trump has done is by placing the tariffs at, I think it's 125% or 145%, those tariff numbers are still in place while this pause continues. And by using that as the baseline or benchmark, what he's doing is he's saying to China, we could destroy you with these tariffs, but we're not going to do that because Trump doesn't want to threaten or doesn't want to invite military retaliation. We're 90 days from a deal being announced with China. We have a deal with the UK. We're apparently very close to one with India. And as soon as these dominoes start to fall, I guarantee you that other nations are going to fall into line because they don't want to be the last one in the door because they'll get a worse deal than the ones that are early in the door. I mean, Trump knows that his tariffs could absolutely crush China. It's already doing it. China is suffering from closed factories. Tens, hundreds of, if not millions of factory jobs have been lost. And the economy is suffering greatly because it is a manufacturing and export economy. It relies on exports, particularly to the United States. So punitive tariffs are going to hurt China much more than they hurt us. China imports or exports, should I say, 5 times as many goods as the United States does to China. That the numbers by themselves will simply tell you which country is in a better position to use its leverage to forge a more favorable deal. So, China could be looking at its own economic future, its own economic survival. And I think that by itself, from a man like Trump, who is, a world-class negotiator, they're going to be forced, and I think they already have in this deal, but it's only a 90-day deal. They're going to be forced to come to the table and make concessions, not because Xi Jinping likes Trump or because China wants to give the U.S. a break, but as a means of survival.
Sarah, I want to make a point here, which is in contravention, I think, to the point that Tim just made, and it is that our demand for Chinese goods means that it's a bad deal for America to have high tariffs imposed because those tariffs are imposed on Americans.
Sure.
And it is Donald Trump standing in the way and introducing government friction to a transaction that can be operated without such friction. And I think he sees a political win there. And he is, somehow made himself the spokesman or a person who is, buoying American manufacturing concerns, when I would prefer him stand for free trade and not impose increased tariffs on the American people. And then just in terms of the politics of it, the notion that he called up Jeff Bezos when he heard that they were going to line item the tariff amount on Amazon and said, basically, if we believe the reports, at a conniption fit, don't do it. Well, why? If we're so proud of all of our policies and this is a necessary thing for the American people, why not support it with letting people see where the money's going? Well, I think that's because he's not in favor of it, and it's to American people's detriment. I know, my house is full of a bunch of stuff that is low-cost Chinese goods because that's what I've preferred in the market when I went to buy it. The camera I'm speaking, that's viewing me now, I'm sure was made in China. I haven't checked, but probably the pen in my hand, China. And it's an additional cost for Americans. So I just want to make that.
It's also an additional cost for Chinese, but Trump has a larger strategy in mind, which is to have the goods that are being made almost universally in China made in the U.S., bought and sold and manufactured in the United States. Now, that's a long-term game. That's changing the entire structure of the world economy, essentially. And that's what he's trying to do. It's the most ambitious effort any president has ever made to restructure, a global economy. And I think his dream is to be able to, and how realistic it is, I have no idea. But his dream is to raise enough money in tariffs from foreign countries to be able to eliminate the income tax for those making less than $150,000 or $100,000. Again, I'll leave it to the economists, and I'll leave it to God to figure out whether that could ever happen. But that is, I think, his ultimate goal. He's got enormous ambitions that go way beyond tariffs.
Well, I think the second thing you said is a great goal. I don't think that it's going to happen, but when I read Article 2 of the United States Constitution, which gives the powers of the executive, I don't see remaking the global economy to one's preference, delineated.
Well, he remakes the global economy by remaking deals for the host country. He's not forcing others to do anything, but he is coming to the negotiating table, presumably in good faith, to level the playing field. Because let's face it, it's been a tilted playing field against the United States for the longest time. We pay far more in tariffs than we require our trading partners to. And I think it's about time that somebody, and Trump is probably the only guy who could do it, who would make a concerted effort of full court press to level the playing field.
I don't see it as leveling so much as punishing Americans, but we can probably leave it there.
Let's call it there. The big banks are canceling the recession prognostications altogether, and the White House is still running around, waving the woohoo, we did it. And you know what? After the last 4 years, America probably needs a good win. So at least this administration has given it a shot. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. We are back to twist the brain, have a little bit of fun with our panel of overly excitable people, especially Andrew and Graham. Andrew is running the board, so things will get weird and possibly incomprehensible, and so just try to play close attention to what he has to say. Anyway, take it away, Andrew.
Well, since Scott's on the board today, I'm a bit nervous. I'm going to be my best behavior. I don't want to perturb Scott. So I'd just like to ask one question, team. Are you okay? Are you okay? I mean, you see, it works. Or the mom and dad, or the neighbor, or when you go to church, no, I really mean it. They're trusted and interlocers. Think of the people. If your kid wanted to find out whether or not there's a man on the moon, or whatever, something, or whether those aliens are here, who are the people they talk to beyond the kids who love talking about it? So with that important information out of the way, let's get down to our trivia questions.
It's amazing how long you can go on without saying a single thing.
I had no idea what he was doing. Where did he...
That was former President Joe Biden during a CNN town hall in 2021.
That was a 2021 recall.
Well, that makes more sense now.
Thank you for that more recent history lesson. Appreciate that.
Since I'm never allowed to speak during our segments, I have to milk this for everything I can here. So anyway, our questions today are brought to you from none other than Corey. Don't call me Corey Hart Smith. And since David Patterson is not here today, trivia will be far more interesting. And we can bet that Tim Donner is going to win today. So let's get started with the questions here.
You just jinxed me.
Question number 1. Which world leader visited the White House on Tuesday, May 7th? Canada's Mark Carney, Italy's Giorgia Meloni, or Britain's Keir Starmer?
Mark Carney.
Correct, yes. Okay, Tim's on the board. Nobody else gave me. Okay.
D, none of those three persons are world leaders.
Oh, gee.
Oh.
All right, moving on.
I have to split a hair with that one. I'd give Scott that one.
He's such a lawyer.
Anyway, question number 2. Which news outlet was recently awarded a Pulitzer Prize for a story misrepresenting the facts about abortion bans? Was it Vox, ProPublica, or New York Times?
ProPublica.
Tim, yes, he's two on the board.
And Graham wrote a great piece about that people should check out at libertynation.com.
Yes, I was about to plug that. Thank you, Scott, for doing my job. I was about to say that. You got to read the latest fake news Pulitzer Prize has been awarded.
By the way, if you stopped your sentence before you got to abortion, it would have been all of the Pulitzers that were, who for a fake news story.
I really think we need to rename that site Anti-Publica.
Yeah.
Question number 3. The president announced on social media that he had plans to reopen which prison? Alcatraz, Folsom, or Rikers Island?
Alcatraz.
Alcatraz. But no, you got to say it in Sean Connery's voice. You got to say,
Alcatraz.
Welcome to the Rock.
Oh, that was good. That was good, Tim.
Andrew, the one time you need to call back for more history, you got to go Clint Eastwood, I think. Escape from Alcatraz. That's the original.
I went and watched that right after the president's announcement.
Did it hold up?
Pretty well.
Yeah.
But it was a 1979 movie. So, yeah, it was 46 years ago.
Anyway, question 4. In a discussion with NBC's Kristen Welker about price hikes, what was the president referring to when he said young girls could perhaps have 3 or 4 instead of 37? Was it pronouns, dolls, or dresses?
Dolls.
Guys and dolls. Everybody loves guys and dolls. Tim is on the board, number 3. And, you know, the economics of that is just befuddling because Scott knows what happened to subjective value. You know, what if I appreciate $37? I mean, not that. Who the heck wants to have $37? Man, my kids have 37 stuffies, so I shouldn't be talking anyway. Anyway, so yes, Tim is on the board again.
Abundance and choices are fundamentally American. It's for the rest of the world to restrict their choices. We like abundance and choices, which is why we are importing all that stuff. All right, I took it serious. I'll stop.
It's all a matter of quality rather than quantity.
So, question 5 here. The end of which war was commemorated throughout Europe on May 8th? Was it the Second World War, Vietnam, or Revolutionary War?
Second World War.
Yes, Graham is on the board, the Second World War. And you can read more about it in Dave Patterson's excellent article, World War II Ended 8 Decades Ago, and the World Remembers. Question 6. When recently asked why his approval rating was 17%, which U.S. senator said, quote, polls come and go? Is it Senator Chuck Schumer, Senator Susan Collins, or Senator Bernie Sanders?
Chuck Schumer.
Who shot
I got it. Schumer.
Hey, Sarah, who do you think got that first, Tim or Graham?
I got it first.
Okay, fine. Sarah got it. Hey, Sarah's on the board. Yeah.
There's Sarah for you. Was it Tim or Graham? It was me.
Neither. It was me.
Yeah. Option
Hey,
C.
the real winners are the American people
above.
in that poll, right?
The funny thing about that statement was that as Chuck Schumer had just finished crowing about how the polls had Trump down, his favorability down. Just literally saying that, and then the reporter said, "Well, what about your 17%?" And he was like, "Oh, polls come
and go." That's
So that one
politics.
came in real quick.
But we all know that polls are amazing when certain people are winning, right? Right?
Yes, then they're deadly accurate.
That was my Chuck Schumer impression. Everybody knows I put
That's very good.
It's a work in progress. Thank you for
But
that.
you have to have those bifocal glasses to make it truly real.
All right, question 7. What happened on Thursday, May 8th, between the United States and the United Kingdom? Trade deal, prisoner swap, or defense negotiations?
Trade deal.
Yep, Tim got that here. You can read more of that in my terrific article penned by yours.
No, it was not a tie.
White House sets trade tone after U.S.-UK deal, and I'll summarize it by saying nothing much happened in that thing. Anyway, moving on here. Question 8. Name the New York Attorney General the FBI is investigating for misrepresenting real estate holdings.
Fish the dish.
Tisha Casa.
Elliot Spitzer, Letitia James, or James Boasberg?
Tish.
Oh yeah, that's the supermodel. I said, yeah, Letitia James.
Letitia James, yes.
Yeah, you went the wrong way there, Scott.
Yeah,
This woman's a supermodel you're referring to, Scott?
let's move on.
Letitia James.
In what world?
All right. Question number 9. Where did Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer travel recently for trade talks with their Chinese counterparts? Switzerland, Beijing, or Scott C's house?
Switzerland.
Switzerland is the answer. Who got that? Graham?
You can give it to Graham.
Yeah.
I've got an insurmountable lead, so I don't want to get greedy.
Tim had already done the math. He was like,
All right. Final question of the day.
Wow. Already?
I'm giving Sarah a headache. She definitely wants to be able to. So, last question. 2 Democratic politicians in which city have proposed legislation to allow the city council to oust the mayor with a 3/4 vote? Is it Chicago, Los Angeles, or New York City?
LA.
New York.
New York.
New York. Graham is correct.
Graham beat.
And I do believe actually it is a tie between Graham and Tim. So Tim gave that
It's kind of a disgrace that he lost it on the New York question, too. The man who fashions himself as a...
I did not lose. I simply was in a
you lost victory.
time.
Sorry, you didn't lose the
Such
game.
an
You just lost your
lead. What happened? Maybe we need a run.
I goes to the runner.
So actually, we can end this right here by asking Graham one question. Who will win the 2025 World Series? Is it Boston Red Sox, or is it Tim's New York Mets, or is it Scott's Philadelphia Phillies?
Cubs.
It's got to be one of those three.
No, it's the Cubs.
I'm gonna go with the Mets.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I guess
Boy, Graham, you're even smarter than I thought.
so. This way, actually, Graham is the winner then of Sig 5 trivia. So everyone, give him a round of applause. Nate, get this filed. Nate, style. And thank you, everyone. It was lovely. And Scott Cosenza makes me the most nervous man in the world next to my wife.
Apparently. Anyway, well, thanks for playing, guys, and anybody out there that played along with the mangy horde of analysts we have brought to you today. Hope we left you all with some smiles and dinner party facts and anecdotes, and we'll see you the next time around. Have a good one. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform, YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, or on them all. As well, Liberty Nation News has its own Roku channel, where you can see all of our TV productions. Now, Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. I'm your host, Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for the latest news and commentary. Your choice for free thinking, free speech, libertynation.com.